Right, so hi everyone, my name's Alex Willimott. I'm the community manager for Lynx in the UK and Ireland, and I've been doing this for about a year, and essentially it's my job to talk to sort of 1 million Lynx fans on a day-to-day basis, and as a result of that we've picked up some great learnings about how we keep our fans happy, and I'd like to just sort of see if I can pass on a bit of that today. This is just a few of them, and that's me at the bottom there, making sure that they're all enjoying themselves. This was last year in August when we sent a load of them to Belize. But I'm actually here today because I feel like there's a lot of inconsistency in the community management industry, rather than to talk about Lynx specifically. And people don't. There's still no standard for what community managers do and who they report to and what they report on and this sort of thing. So if I were to ask all of you, what does your community manager actually do all day? I'm sure I'd get 100 different responses. And I was talking to a guy recently that I've been working with for about 6 months, who, and I was saying, this is kind of how I see it. It's all a bit of a mismatch at the moment. And he said, yeah, no, I have no idea what you do either. And that kind of brought it home to me quite a bit, and I started looking into it, and I found this on the net, which was is a good indicator, I think, of how people look at it, and what I think I do, which maybe a bit more of this, what my friends think I do, which is sit on Facebook all day. And actually, I did get that when I first started. Somebody said, "Oh, what? So your job is just to sit on Facebook all day?" I didn't really know how to answer at the time, but what society thinks I do, which is running around, swanning around, drinking at parties, and always on a couple of phones, and what I actually do, which is much more based around, looking at trends, and whilst a lot of it is talking to fans, a lot of it is also, analysing what we're doing and working out where we can improve and how we can get more interaction. So I figured I'd put together a few questions just to sort of shed a little bit more light on this, and hopefully, allow us to use our community managers a little bit more effectively. And there are literally thousands of platforms out there, and it seems like there's a new one comes up every week. Path picked up a lot of traction last year. Vine has just been launched. It's a nice sort of snippet, 6 seconds of video for like an extension of the Twitter platform. And it's a perfectly legitimate question. Are we in the right spaces? I think this is key, because I can very well imagine, for instance, an accountancy firm using Twitter. That kind of makes sense because, they have a good way to make sure that a good way to show people that they're up to date with legislation, a good way to sort of showcase their latest work, promote good work that they're doing, and maybe as another customer service channel. It kind of makes sense for an accountancy firm to be on there, I guess, but for an accountancy firm to be using Instagram, I can't really see how that would work. I just can't see that there's any kind of behind-the-scenes stuff that you can capture as an accountancy firm, and I don't think that there's really any way that you can effectively use Instagram's filters to make your accountancy look a bit more interesting. So, but that said, I'm happy to hear from anyone who is a social accountant and see what kind of value they're getting out of it. But I guess my point is that you don't have to do everything and be everywhere. And there's, people are always looking at the new platforms that are coming out and saying, where do we fit here? And I don't think it's a case of where do we fit here, I think it's do we fit here? And there's always an appropriate place, an appropriate platform for your brand, and it doesn't have to be every platform. So those platforms are very diverse. They're used in very different ways and for very different things. And I think that you need to be aware of how your audience use them before you can think about how you use them. And really, are we doing the right things in the right spaces? It's about just using the platforms intelligently. I think it makes perfect sense for Whole Foods, for instance, to be on Pinterest because they have a very visual product. It's a very visual platform. What they're putting out fits perfectly with that platform. And there's also a huge established following of food lovers on Pinterest, and it just makes sense that they're in that space. Nike gets sort of rolled out as the best for dynamic video and that sort of thing, and this is Nike Football, who again have some really fantastic dynamic content, and it makes absolute sense for their video to be hosted on YouTube. You know, it's an appropriate use of the platform, and actually they've used the YouTube real estate to quite good effect there as well, tying it back to their product. Victoria's Secret have a great Instagram page which they use for sort of behind the scenes stuff and sneak peeks and previews and that sort of thing, and I think Instagram works really well for that. It's kind of a more intimate brand relationship, and they also have a very good Pinterest page, again, you know, a highly visual brand in a highly visual platform. For the sake of completeness, I also checked out the YouTube channel, which is again worth a look, but you know, again, using a visual brand in a dynamic way in a visual space. But once you've established the spaces and you know that you're doing the right thing, it's also good to make sure that you are on brand, because those examples that I've given, those three, you know, Nike and Victoria's Secret and Whole Foods, they're good examples of a brand using a platform in an appropriate way, but they're also extremely on brand. There's no way that you could look at that Victoria's Secret page and think it was anything else. But I think that there's a distinction to be made between publishers and advertisers, and there's a lot of talk at the moment about how advertisers should be publishers. I don't think that this is really necessarily the case, because a publisher is putting out content, and the content is effectively the product. And we as advertisers are looking to make some kind of, to drive some brand love, or make our viewers get some kind of interaction out of our content. So the content, it doesn't have an intrinsic value. It's led to quite an interesting situation at the moment where we've got a lot of brands who are seemingly pushing content for content's sake, and in social spaces this effectively means begging for likes, or like baiting. And unless you're Andrex, really, you know, we all love puppies, but unless you're Andrex, this isn't really going to give you any kind of cut through. There's no branding on this. There's no brand relevance. And this phenomenon actually is gaining coverage all over the place and being documented on sites like Condescending Corporate Rampage, which is naming and shaming kind of the worst offenders of this. And really, like baiting and not tying your social activity back to your brand, I think is kind of like a broken pencil, pointless. No, I've got like 2 smiles. Fine. That's okay, it didn't go down well in the other theatre either. But my point here, I guess, is that we should be chasing brand love and not likes. The content is not the product for us. So, if you've chosen the appropriate spaces, you're using them fully, you're driving brand love, how do you go about joining the right conversations? This doesn't just mean sort of jumping into wherever your fans are talking. It's about becoming involved in fan conversations without being intrusive. And if you wouldn't do it in real life, why would you do it in social? I think there's a time and a place for any of your brand's input, and you need to ensure what you're saying is relevant to the conversation that you're joining. Otherwise, you are just hijacking that conversation. A couple of good examples here. Apologies, this slide isn't very pretty. William Shatner was talking about his latest film, Escape from Planet Earth, and we just happened to have launched the Lynx Apollo campaign, where we're putting a guy into space. So one of the easiest ways to escape from Planet Earth is to sign up at lynxapollo.com, and we saw that this was trending and jumped on it, and it's just being aware of that conversation and being able to have something that's relevant to it in that time, that got us quite a few retweets. And then fans talking in general, this is something that wasn't directed at us, but was talking about us. If girls go mad for lads with links on, surely then I should just dip myself in a vat of impulse. We just sort of picked this up, and we were aware that this conversation was happening, so we dived in, and we do this sort of on a day-to-day basis to try and tie back to our brand. But I guess the key thing that I'm trying to say is to go where your fans are and make sure that you're being relevant because otherwise, they're not going to respond well. So if you're in the right places, you're pushing brand love, you're joining conversations in a relevant way. When the next big newsjackable story comes up, the next big horse meat scandal or whatever it is, how quickly can we react? Excuse me a minute. And I'm going to trot out the Oreos example again, because this is still one of the best reactive pieces of content that I've seen recently, and the turnaround time was genuinely very impressive. The lights went out in the middle of the Super Bowl. Millions and millions of people watching the Super Bowl, and as soon as there's nothing happening on TV, they go straight to their phones. And within a few minutes of it happening, Oreos had this up on Twitter, and they made their brand relevant at that time to that audience. And it was, it's a fantastic example of being aware that these things are happening in your sphere and being able to make your brand relevant at that time. The Dulux example from the Brit Awards. Dulux noticed that Damien Hirst's Brit Award may or possibly may not have used some of their colours, and so they put this out during the ad break. And again, ad break, in the middle of the Brit Awards, people are jumping on their phones because they don't particularly want to see the ads that are on there. This is a great time to check up what people are saying on Facebook, on Twitter, and that sort of thing. And again, a timely sort of intrusion into conversation, but it wasn't seen in that way. This from Mini was a little bit late to the party. I think it was a couple of weeks after the main sort of horse meat thing blew up. But again, it's a really nice piece of creative. I think it's just enough. It's within the time frame enough that they managed to get away with it. But this is really the danger with newsjacking, is if you're late to the party, people are already so sick of seeing whatever it is that you're playing on in the news that they're not going to be very forgiving if you turn up late. So, like with the Harlem Shake, which is a recent one, I'm sure most of you will have seen it, but it's one guy dancing on his own for 15 seconds, and then on the music drop, everybody else in the background, foreground sort of dives in, and really I don't think any brand should be playing on the Harlem Shake anymore, because we're at that stage now where it's big for a few days, and now people are so bored of seeing it and hearing about it that they're likely to react quite badly. And I think it's probably better to miss an opportunity like that than to damage your brand image. So I guess my point there is do it fast or don't do it at all. So, with all that in place, we need a way to make sure that we're achieving what we set out to do. And question number 6 is, how are we measuring? This isn't really just a case of taking a measuring tool, applying it to a platform and getting some kind of winning formula out of it. It just doesn't really work like that. It's a lot more complex. And on Lynx, for example, we find it useful to judge an individual post performance by taking the number of people who've actually interacted with it out of the number of people, the total number of people who've seen it, and we take a percentage of that, and that's sort of our benchmark. So, for instance, if we have 1,000 people interacting with a particular post out of 100,000 who've seen it, then we've got an interaction rate of about 1%. But in reality, this is only part of the picture because on Lynx, we're fortunate enough to have quite a lot of Facebook paid media, which allows us to reach potentially millions of people, which is great because that bottom number really, really climbs as you add more money, basically. But of course, the top number, the interactions, doesn't climb in proportion. So you end up with a situation where actually the wider you push your content, the lower your interaction rate appears. And this is because when you first put out your content, you're already hitting those core fans. You're already hitting the people who are most likely to interact with you. And then outside of that are their friends, who are your next level of reach. They're your viral reach, and they, again, are reasonably likely to interact. But as soon as you introduce paid media, you've gone outside of that initial sphere, and you've got a reduction in the propensity to engage. You end up with people are less and less likely as your content reaches more of them to actually make some kind of interaction with your content. So as you can see, there's no sort of one-size-fits-all solution. It's really about finding something that fits with your objectives, something that you make specific for your brand. And it's also about ensuring that you're flexible, because when the platforms inevitably change, you need to be able to understand how your data relates to your historical data, how your current performance can be translated against your previous performance. So with measurement in mind, so the key point there is get some brand-specific metrics and understand the context of those. So with measurement in mind, is there any way to game the system? On Facebook, for instance, you may have noticed that you see more content from the people that you like, or more content from the people that you talk to more often. And Facebook does this on purpose to serve you content that will keep you on the Facebook page, so they can serve you more ads, so they can pick up more ad revenue. But this system is a highly complex algorithm called EdgeRank, but it's actually based on three very simple things, which are affinity, weight, and time decay. So affinity is basically sort of the sum of your interactions with a brand's content in the past, and therefore the likelihood that you will interact with them in the future at its simplest level. Weight is kind of the value that Facebook attributes to a piece of content. So for instance, if you're putting out an image post, that has a higher weight than a plain text status. And that also applies to interactions with your content. So if somebody is commenting on your page, that takes more user interaction than merely hitting like, and so a comment is weighted higher than a like. And Facebook uses this to judge how many people it sends your content out to. The final one is time decay, which is, as your content is older, it becomes less relevant, less likely to be served up. And this is important because EdgeRank has quite a long tail impact on reach. So, for instance, when you need to launch a big campaign, as we did earlier in this year, if there's a way to game the system and get your EdgeRank higher, then you already have a good platform of reach to build on when your big paid media thing kicks in. So this was a small scale piece of content which we put up, which we knew a lot of people would react to, and therefore we would get a lot of organic reach. It would drive our EdgeRank up. The idea is that essentially it was a response to a lot of inbound posts that we had on the page, which were saying things like, if this post gets 1,000 likes, you have to make a pink can with my name on it, or something like that. And we didn't really have a good way to respond to that in our tone of voice. And that went on for a good couple of weeks. And we eventually came up with this piece of content that we thought was a good way of responding to that. And it's basically, it says at the bottom there, 10 million likes and we'll make a golden flying can. And, this is, going back to what we were saying, this is effectively like baiting. We kind of figured that we would get a very negative response from users on Facebook, but we would also get a very good interaction rate. And I particularly love this guy's comment, will it smell like bullshit too? But when we actually followed up with this, where we created a golden flying can, I'll just let this run a bit. So some guy was sat in the office for half a day, boring out the middle of a Lynx can and tearing apart a perfectly good remote control helicopter to create a Lynx can that we can fly around the park. And it's still, that's in the office somewhere, still causes mayhem when we pick it out. You can't really control where it goes, so it took a few takes. But anyway, so we created this piece of content, and basically we posted it back to everybody who had given us that negative sentiment, and the response was really, really good. And we had loads of people saying, will you sell the flying golden can? If so, how much? I want one, and that sort of thing. And I think because we made that effort, we went back and we posted it to everybody. We actually got a fantastic response rate, and we had basically 1 in 5 people who had seen this, near enough, had some kind of interaction with this piece of content, which is unbelievable when you're hitting 150,000 people and you've got 30,000 of them are making some kind of interaction. But the point with this is that this piece of content, because it was so viral, sent our edge rank through the roof about 2 days before we launched our Lynx Apollo campaign. And we already had that huge relevance in edge rank to launch our platform. So, game the system if you can, but not too often. If your fans realise what it is that you're doing, then that negative sentiment that you get is unlikely to be mitigated by anything that you do as a follow-up. So I guess game the system, but time it for best impact. So, yep, great to have all that. If you don't actually have people to talk to, then your content loses some value. So there's been a lot of talk recently about followers versus engagement and how your follower count actually doesn't matter as much anymore, and there are a lot of people sort of championing this, but actually follower count really kind of does matter. It's easy to forget that the reason we're allowed to do all of this stuff is because a lot of people go out there and buy the product. And if you're putting out content that is reaching more people, then you're reinforcing your brand message across more people, and that can only be a good thing. You don't want to be the stand-up comedian who's in the Royal Albert Hall with 4 or 5 people laughing their heads off. That's not a successful gig. But on their own, follower numbers don't really mean anything. So there's no point having a huge fan base who love puppies, if you're not Andrex, a huge fan base who love puppies but have no idea what your brand actually does. So hand in hand with this, I think, is the idea that you need to be engaging your fans. And how can we engage more fans? I think how can we engage more fans, how can we get more followers, really kind of boil down to the same thing. And that is, how do we become more interesting? I'll just let you absorb Jedi Jesus for a second. But the answer to this, I think, is also very, very simple, but also, very hard to achieve. And that is, be more interested. I think that we as community managers are probably the people best placed to do this, because we are the people who should be going out and reading the magazines that our demographic read. And, we are the people who should be watching the same films and immersing ourselves in that culture and getting out there and meeting the demographic. And if that means, going where they are, sitting in a skate park at South Bank and listening to what they have to say to you, then I think that's what we ought to be doing. And I think really it's our job to be that conduit, if you like, between the brand and the demographic, so that we're best placed to tell our brands when something's going to resonate. And just being that, having that relevant knowledge base, so that when our brands want to put something out there, we can perhaps tailor it in a way that is most going to resonate with our demographic. So I also think maybe if you've got a community manager who can answer all of those questions and who knows how to do all of those things, then maybe there's an extra bonus question you should be asking them. And my boss is sat over there. So question number 11 was, are we paying our community manager enough? And that's about it from me. I think I might have rattled through it a little bit, but if you have any questions, I guess now's the time.